Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to greet all of you on behalf of Langham Publishing and welcome you to the launch of Ethiopian Diaspora Churches on Mission and Intergenerational Perspective on Ethiopian Churches in the United States by Dr. Mehari Tedla Korcho. This timely release is published as part of Langham Academic and explores missional potential of mobilizing the intergenerational context of Ethiopian diaspora church communities in the United States. My name is Sophia Solivi. I take care of communications at Langham Publishing, and it's my honor to host this event today. As we gather in this virtual space, please feel free to let us know where you're joining from in the chat and interact with each other. Just to give you a brief overview of our schedule today, to begin with, we are going to be hearing from Dr. Mehari Tedla Korcho on the subject of his book. Next, we will hear from two endorsers of this publication, Dr. Sam George and Mekdes Haddis. We will then have a brief Q&A session, so please post your questions in the chat throughout, and if the time allows, we will read some of them out loud to the author. Finally, we will share about how and where you can get a hold of this wonderful resource. So, to help us delve into what this book is about and how it came into being, I'm delighted to invite our author, Dr. Mehari Tedla Korcho, to share with us. Dr. Korcho is originally from Ethiopia and now serves as a mission strategist with One Challenge International, where he coaches and trains diaspora families and church leaders to effectively deal with their intergenerational dynamics. He also equips young people to engage in church revitalization and planting movements in the United States. Dr. Korcho has a PhD in intercultural studies from Columbia International University and lives in Colorado with his wife Naz and their two daughters. Dr. Korcho, we welcome you and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for the kind introduction. I'm so excited to share my book with you all. So if I can share my screen here. The title or the topic is Ethiopian Diaspora Churches on Missions and Intergenerational Perspective. So basically, I'm going to be talking about Ethiopian Diaspora Churches in the US. And I will be discussing their missionary engagement and intergenerational aspect. Here is the outline. First, we'll take a look at the background, and then we will go into the intergenerational dynamics, and then missional engagement, and then challenges and opportunities, and finally, I will give recommendations. So first, background. Ethiopian diaspora communities in the US are the second largest African immigrants. This means that there is a huge potential among the Ethiopian diaspora churches for missions. So there's a big potential for missions. Over 140 Ethiopian diaspora churches are planted in the US for the last 50 years, half a century. About 300 to 500 members in average. Ethiopian communities came to the US in 3 waves of migration. The first wave is before 1974. The second wave is between 1974 to 1991. And the third wave is between 1991 to present. Basically, Ethiopian diaspora churches has been established during the second wave of migration, which is between 1974 to 1991. And the characteristics of these churches, when at the foundation, at the beginning, was more of survival, with a kind of survival mentality, because most of them are actually refugees, and then also predominantly single male members or church members. So basically, survival mentality and single male dominance can be the characteristic of those churches that has been planted at the beginning, which means the single male dominant actually has no family concept, which has a kind of impact on the third wave of migration, which is during the third wave of migration, the Ethiopian churches has been exploded or they grow actually exponentially. Um, so that growth was not really expected, or it's a kind of unexpected, because during the second wave it was just single male dominance community, because of the specifically because of the diversity visa, which actually allow Ethiopians to come as a family. Specifically in 2004 and 2009, Ethiopia won actually the first uh, uh, diversity visa lottery. So most Ethiopians came to diaspora churches exponentially, which means the intergenerational dynamics become obvious, and they were not prepared for that kind of growth in short period of time. And the other thing that we can talk about during the third wave was that, like, in the second wave it was a kind of um, survival mentality where they were sheltering actually themselves under the American churches. But during the third wave, most Ethiopian churches actually got their own facilities. So from the survival to um, somehow independence and isolation kind of approach that they're following today. Intergenerational dynamics. It's good to give an understanding of these generations. I studied actually the first 1.5 and second generation. So Ethiopian diaspora churches are actually young communities. So we have only second generation. We're actually about to start to have third generation, but by and large, we have only second generation. So first generation refers to those who migrated at the age of 22 and over. But this age is I categorize this. I give this category based on age because uh, those people who came after 22, after the age of 22, they didn't have the opportunity to go through the American school system. That means that they don't have much exposure to the hosting culture. So first generation is more attached to their home country, and most of them have actually economic challenge, or they actually want to, one of the challenge they want to tackle and overcome is actually economic challenge. Church practice, their church practice is very much home culture driven kind of church, which is basically the church they do is how they know it in Ethiopia. So it's very much home culture driven church, and it's exclusively serving the first generation. When it comes to 1.5 generation, this refers to those migrated between the age of 11 to 21. This means that they do have actually exposure to both cultures, which is before the age of 11. They have a kind of formation stage, culturally speaking, back in Ethiopia. And after the age of 11, which is they can be exposed at least from middle school to college in the hosting culture, which makes them actually bilingual and bicultural community. So in this case, this 1.5 generation are able to converse with both the home culture and hosting culture. And mostly they have non-economic challenges, um, mostly, which is, religious, social, mental, emotional, all those challenges can be huge uh, deal among the 1.5 generations. Church practice among the 1.5 generation, most follow the pattern of the first generation. This is interesting. It is because of the reality that 1.5 generation want to continue church in the pattern of the first generation. There is there is a hope for Ethiopian communities to continue church as an Ethiopian church, as an ethnic church. So the 1.5, most of 1.5 generation actually want to follow the first generation pattern in continuing the church. But some advocate for the second gen, and they want to do ministry in English. Second generation, when it comes to the second gen, this refers to migrant those who migrated before the age of 10 are born and raised in the hosting culture or in America. They have much exposure in the hosting culture, so they are more attached to the hosting culture, or their worldview is actually shaped by the hosting culture. Again, they have non-economic challenge than economic challenge. So it doesn't mean that like the first generation have only economic challenge, which is they may face other challenges as well, cultural shift, socio-economic, social challenge, mental challenge, and so forth. But mostly 1.5 generation and second generation have actually non-economic economic challenge. So this by itself tells us that like most of the time first generation, when it comes to the communication across generational lines, most first generation have the approach of economic challenge when it comes to really communicating with 1.5 and second gen, which is they provide all the things that they need economically speaking, but when it comes to socially, uh, spiritually, mentally, all these issues are not really addressed by the first generation when it comes to supporting the 1.5 and second gen. When it comes to second generation church practices, no church experience. Basically, from day one, first generation would go to the main sanctuary, and second generation would go to the backyard, which is to the rooms for uh, Sunday school. So that actually creates a kind of barrier and division between the generations, which is like which it ended up actually have no family church worship among the three generations. So because of that, there is massive exodus. Graduation from high school is also graduation from the church. So most second generation will be leaving the church after high school. Only about 4 English-speaking churches has been established by the second generation so far, which is in 50 years, half a century, but only 4 churches has been planted by the second generation. When it comes to missional engagement, understanding of missions, when we talk about their understanding of missions, it's very much shaped by the traditional approach, which is from the west to the rest. When I ask participants about how they understand missions, I was asking who is mission sender countries today, and most of them responded that like most responded Americans, Canadians, or European countries, and none of mentioned actually Africa to be a mission sender continent. And also, I asked who is most recipient of missionaries, and again, Africa became actually mission recipient nation or a continent by and large. So, in that case, we can conclude that the Ethiopian communities still are in a kind of traditional approach where they are in the receiving side than in the giving side. And also it's shaped by the Great Commission verse, which is they don't have a kind of comprehensive approach towards like the biblical understanding of missions. When it comes to practice of missions, there is potential, huge potential for missions, which is there is resource, human resource, financial resource, and everything. But when it comes to practice, it is not really maximized or really structurally used for the mission endeavor. So there are people who are really interested to go on missions, but then the mobilization side is not really ready for that. The other thing that we can talk about their practice of missions is it's very much inwardly focused, which is if we talk about missions to Ethiopians here in the States or missions back home in Ethiopia. So it's about reaching out to Ethiopians here or back in Ethiopia. And they don't have a cross-cultural ministry, which is they have zero cross-cultural experience of missions. When it comes to their attitude, it becomes from survival to isolation, which is at the beginning, at their foundation, it's very much survival, which is under the American churches. They would be renting out a space and they do church. But now most of the churches have their own buildings, so they are really isolated and they have their own way of doing the church. When it comes to evangelism outreach, it's very much I really appreciate that almost all responded that like their church has monthly evangelism outreach, but I think it has to grow to become more in the missions approach in terms of once in a while kind of campaign. uh, Instead of doing that once in a while as a campaign, it's good to be staying and residing in the other side and reach out to those communities beyond their own communities. So from evangelism outreach to missions. And then the exclusive approach versus the intergenerational approach is also another characteristic of the practice in missions, which is the first generation is exclusively serving its own generation, and it's not equipping the 1.5 and second generation towards missions. There is a huge potential even among the 1.5 and second gen, but still the exclusivity is the challenge. When it comes to challenge and opportunities, challenge staying in the comfort zone is one of the biggest challenge. Church splitting is another challenge. Lack of discipleship and missional mindset is another challenge. When it comes to opportunities, community, spiritual fervency, and simplicity, cultural resourcefulness, all these are opportunities that can be maximized or that can be utilized for missions. Recommendations. I recommend that Ethiopian diaspora churches would continue their community and spiritual fervency. I recommended that Ethiopian diaspora churches would grow from the inward focus to the outward focus, which is going beyond their own community. And also, I recommend that they grow from evangelism campaign to missions. I recommend that they consider a family approach, which is there is a fragmentation between the generations and across the generational lines. There is a kind of communication barrier. So basically, the first generation pastor is not really the pastor of the whole community, the whole family unit. It has to be addressed actually from the family level to the church level. So that's one thing that I recommend that they would consider family approach. And the other one is that they would consider partnership with American churches and mission agencies, which is this is very challenging, which is uh, there's no any connection between local American churches and diaspora churches when it comes to missions. So that is another thing that they need to consider. The other one is consider evaluating church structure, which is, there's no family worship. So to bring that family worship and to become more missional, I think they need to evaluate their church structure. I suggest actually four church models. One is they can do a once in a while kind of church together, joint church worship together with all the generations, and that is something that is practiced by most churches. And the second one is there's a two church service model, which is they can have two church service, one in English and one in Amharic in the Ethiopian language, and they can address both the second gen, and then also they can open up their doors for others in the English service. So the two church service is the most I recommend, and it's only one church that is practicing recently for the last 5 months now. It's actually in Denver, Colorado. So that's the only church that's practicing the two church service model now. Otherwise, most churches are still struggling to have family worship. The third church model I suggest was that they would have a kind of partnership with American churches and join them in that ministry. For instance, I and my wife joined one of the Presbyterian churches, and we are actually in the church, revitalization with them. So, Ethiopian diaspora churches can actually be missional in revitalizing churches in America by joining them, by partnering with them. So about 4,000 churches are actually closing their doors every year. So Ethiopian diaspora churches and other diaspora churches have this opportunity to join American churches in church revitalization. The last church structure that I recommend was 1.5 gen or second gen can actually plant a church, English church, so that those people who are actually living the Ethiopian diaspora, especially the second generation who are living the Ethiopian churches, when they finish high school, they can have a platform in those churches that are planted by 1.5 and second generation. Finally, the Ethiopian diaspora churches should consider missional discipleship trainings, which is, even like among the 1.5 and second generation who have actually more cross-cultural exposure, there is no missional mindset, there's no missional discipleship training. So I think we need to consider that as well in order for us to be more missional. So these are the recommendations that I give on my book. And these are all things that I wanted to share. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Korcho. Thank you for this extensive overview and for your invaluable research and the contribution to diaspora missiology, which focuses our attention on the challenges and mission opportunities within diaspora church communities and offers recommendations that are both thoughtful and practical for implementation. We are now pleased to hear from two speakers who have engaged with this book and endorsed it. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Sam George, who serves as the Director of Global Diaspora Institute at Wheaton College Billy Graham Center and as a catalyst for diasporas of the Lausanne movement. Dr. George teaches global migration, diaspora missions, and world Christianity and has authored many articles, book chapters, and books, among which is the recently published Vocations in Diaspora and Diasporas in Asia. Dr. George, we are honored to have you with us today and invite you to take the floor.
Congratulations, Mehari, and on your publication of the book and Langham Publishing. And Langham has been great in bringing out a lot of migration and diaspora themes. I closely track a lot of migration around the world, and the Ethiopian movement has been one thing that I have been closely monitoring. And I'm originally from India. India has long historic connection with the church in Ethiopia, centuries of early Christianity, both in Ethiopia and in India. And I have many friends in Ethiopia. It was a joy to read Mehari's dissertation and then finally converted into a book for a wider audience. And my first book was on Indian American second generation. I was a youth pastor, one of the early youth pastors in the community. And then finally I consolidated and book, a widely read book. And reading Mehari's book, I felt, about my days as a youth pastor and the struggles of, immigrant generation and their American-born children and, challenges as a vibrant ethnic community in a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-denominational American Christian landscape. And so it is not just applicable for Ethiopia, but I think every community who wants to understand how immigrant churches gets formed, thrives and grows and evolves and transitions. And it's a phenomena that we all need to understand. Because American Christianity is diasporic. We are all either immigrants or descendants of immigrants. Our ancestors came from somewhere else, and we all came. So Christianity has come to America through immigrants and missionaries. And so this phenomena, Christianity is not native to America. It was brought here. It was brought here by immigrants. But immigrants from different parts of the world came. As a nation of immigrant, we brought people, America brought people from different shores of the world. And they brought their distinct traits of Christianity. And so if you can trace back, the Lutherans, go back to Germany, and the Presbyterians go back to Scotland. And we see the Scandinavians coming, and of course English, and then the Irish and the Italian Catholics and others. So everyone brought their unique wave. So that was largely the European wave that happened in the 17th, 18th, and early 19th century. And but then we see subsequent waves coming from through African slavery, Atlantic slavery. And then we see the Latin migration. And then now we are seeing Asian migration to America. So different people brought Christianity because most immigrants to America are Christians. Nearly 70% of immigrants are Christians. And so they established by language, by ethnicity, by culture, a unique flavor of Christianity. And these Christianities interact with each other over generation and over decades, and making and remaking of American Christianity. And so every strand of Christianity plays a unique role in revitalizing, renewing, and expanding and making American Christianity more global. And so more global the American churches, more globally connected, more globally relevant, more globally needed we will be. It's important that we understand the globalizing of American Christianity. And I'll close with this quote, the sociologist here in Chicago and at the University of Illinois. He says that immigrants are not de-Christianizing America, but they are de-Europeanizing American Christianity. Basically meant the recent migration from Latin America and Asia, and now from New Africa, is renewing and expanding the American Christianity beyond its Euro-American flavor. And so I would call it as a globalizing of American Christianity. And yeah, Ethiopian American phenomena is a unique strand that we all need to understand. And that'll be a blessing for the church in America and our engagement with the world. So thank you, Mehari. Congratulations on your publication. And it is a book that we all need to read and understand unique dynamics that plays out in an immigrant community and African immigrant community of Ethiopia particularly, and other African communities, and all other immigrant communities will richly benefit from what Mehari's research has brought out. Congratulations again.
And we would like now to move on to our second guest, which is Mekdes Haddis, a thought leader in African missions and a native of Ethiopia. So in 2003, Mekdes moved to the United States to pursue her studies in communications and organizational leadership. Upon publishing her first book, A Just Mission, Laying Down Power and Embracing Mutuality, Mekdes launched the Mutuality Lab, which is a unique space that brings together missionaries, diaspora leaders, immigrant pastors, donors, impact investors, and Western churches for experiential learning. She develops strategies to train individuals and organizations with a fresh look at missions for global impact. Dear Mekdes, we would love to hear your reflections on the ideas laid out in this book, so the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's such a joy and an honor to be with you all today. My name is Mekdes Haddis. As mentioned, I come to you to celebrate the book launch of my friend and colleague of Dr. Mehari. I come to you as someone who has dedicated her life to diaspora mission and cross-cultural ministry, rooted in mutuality and driven by a deep burden to disciple the next generation of diaspora missionaries. Because I really do believe God sent us here to reach the nations. So let me begin by saying this. This is not just a book. This is a moment, an important, timely moment that the Ethiopian Diaspora Church and the global church cannot afford to miss. I came to the US for mission work and spent most of my ministry years serving in majority culture spaces. That was my context, cross-cultural, multi-ethnic, and American. But after having children, the Lord began stirring something new in my husband and me. We felt a deep and undeniable pull to return to our roots. So we said goodbye to our beloved community in the American church, and we took residence in our local Ethiopian church, a vibrant, growing congregation. That's when our eyes were opened. Culturally, we began to feel a third culture. In our own home, in our own language, we felt like outsiders, and we started asking why. Our children would go and be able to play and find community with other kids who look like them, but when it comes to their spiritual growth and nurture, our church's ability to meet the need was very limited. And it was very easy for us to identify that. First of all, space was an issue. They didn't have the proper space even to meet in their age categories. Curriculum was non-existent. I actually started doing some research on churches who might subscribe to some of the curriculums available here in the US. And I only found one church from all Ethiopian churches who had that. And that church is in Ethiopia, not even here in the West. And structurally, there were a lot of things we would consider liabilities. How can we raise our children to be global leaders, missionaries, and impact makers in the world when we can't even manage to disciple them properly? To make matters worse, our churches as a community are full of children. In fact, children far outnumber the adults in most congregations. This is not just a one church issue, it's at every diaspora church we've visited and leaders we've spoken to. And this is an issue we must address today. But to structure the discipleship, the support, the vision hasn't caught up. We are not equipped to meet the needs of this rising second generation. As a parent of a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, that hits very close to home to me. So in the midst of wrestling with these challenges, Dr. Mehari's book was sent to me for endorsement. What he didn't know was that I needed it for my own encouragement, learning, and direction. And it gave me language to use as I navigated this new space of leadership. It equipped me to have empathy and hold the past with honor and understanding. It gave me clarity in what's lacking and how voices like mine can help us move forward as a collective. It challenged me to not be discouraged, but keep pushing by building bridges. It gave me a framework for what I was experiencing and what I believe so many are feeling in diaspora churches across the US, Canada, and Europe. This book doesn't attack the past, it actually honors it. And we have to go to the uncomfortable places with humility in order to make an impactful change for the future. The spiritual vibrancy of our children hangs on the fact that we are able to bridge our first 1.5 and second gen gap and move forward. It helps us see how and why our first generation churches were planted the way they were. Our elders built churches out of deep faith and urgency, and their work must be honored. But that same structure is not enough to carry us into the future. That is not a bad thing to recognize and accept. In fact, a huge tool for working towards a brighter future, especially for those of us who are 1.5 generation, raising second gen children in a culture vastly different from our parents. We're living in a space of tension and often isolation. This book shines a light on that space and shows us where our gifts and leaderships are needed. And it invites us into a conversation marked by humility, clarity, and vision. As someone deeply engaged in global mission, I often speak about the 414 window, that key age range between 4 and 14 when most people make a decision to follow Jesus. Research from the Bible Society and the National Association of Evangelicals shows us that over 85% of believers come to faith in that window. Here's the tragedy. That same window exists in our immigrant churches, but because of the cultural and spiritual gap, we're missing it. We're raising unchurched children in church buildings. If the global church is hoping for second-gen diaspora missionaries to help revitalize the West, and I believe that's exactly what God is doing and calling us to do, then we must start discipling them today. This is urgent. Otherwise, we're not just watching the next generation drift, we're contributing to the secularization of our communities. Because of the lack of missional collaboration with churches of host countries, we lose on being equipped by their resources, and they lose being inspired by our faith legacy and beautiful culture. We need one another. The plethora of resources in host countries can be shared freely, but we have to move beyond sharing church buildings to sharing vision and mission. We have to see each other as equal parts of the body and sit around the table built with everyone in mind. That's why churches need the support of local leaders. But it must go past transactional relationships and be deeply rooted in cultural and spiritual exchange. We have bridge builders in our 1.5 and second gen community to help us accomplish this. There's a lot of work waiting for us, and I hope this book inspires us to ask the right questions and find the right people. Dr. Mehari's book is more than research. It's a prophetic invitation, a call to organize, to unify, to build discipleship structures that can nurture faith, not just preserve tradition. It encourages those of us planting multi-ethnic, intergenerational churches. It equips leaders trying to reach across the gap. It challenges all of us to go beyond survival to renewal. This work supports my own calling to equip the next generation of Ethiopian missionaries for a global gospel movement, and it comes at just the right time. I'm so grateful for the prayer, the humility, and the collaboration that went into this book. I'm honored to support my friend and brother, Dr. Mehari, and I believe this moment can be the beginning of something powerful, a movement marked by mutuality, integration, vision, and spirit-led mission. Thank you so much.
Hi, dear Mekdes, thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words and for drawing our attention to the issues, the generational and spiritual gaps, and for offering both hope and direction to churches as they seek to support their congregations. We would also want to take a moment to thank Dr. Mehari Korcho and Dr. Sam George for their insights and for introducing many of us to the field of diaspora mission studies. We are now moving on to the next section of our presentation, which is a brief time for questions and answers. Given our time limitations, we have selected a few questions that came through in the chat, and we would like to address them now with Dr. Korcho. The first question we have is from Matthew Tzador. Does your research address the reverse mission idea?
I would say yes. If the meaning of reverse missions is before it was from the west to the west, but now from everywhere to everywhere, and by whoever, if that is the idea of the question, which is now people from global south, people from Africa, Latin America, and Asia can be missionaries in the U.S. If the question is about that kind of reverse missions, I would say yes. But it is more than that. I don't believe in turns, which is before it was, the European and American turn, but now it is our turn kind of thing. I don't believe in that because God is a God of all nations, and his intention is actually for all of us to be on missions, on his missions. It is our way of understanding that before it was that way, but today it should be this way. It's supposed to be even before that we all need to be on missions. And it's because of that understanding, understanding of traditional missions, that we have challenges today when we want to be missionaries wherever, basically, wherever God leads us, wherever God sends us. But the challenge is now really to break that barrier of the previous understanding of missions. But basically, in short, my answer would be yes, we are missionaries to the US. Specifically, I can be a good example in that, which is I was so intentional when I come to the US. Because God has revised actually my ministry calling when I was in Sweden. A 19 years old Swedish boy, he challenged me that I was not just a student, but I was there sent by God. So I could, mentor him, pray for him, and encourage him as he's actually going to ministry. So basically, since that time on, I realized that God called me to the U.S. I mean, to the West in general, basically. And then coming to the U.S. is like, okay, how many diaspora communities are really missing the missional aspect of their movement? So that's really in my heart, because like when I was moving from Ethiopia to Sweden, I didn't have this missional mindset. So the same way, when I come to the US, that was my perspective, where like how many diaspora communities like me are actually missing the missional opportunity. or the missional aspect of their movement. So with that, I'm now consider myself. I now consider myself to be a missionary to the U.S. and through mobilizing diaspora churches and diaspora communities towards mission, and also I'm actually engaging in church revitalization in the U.S. So basically, yes, we are missionaries in the U.S.
A brief comment. In the language of reverse and the directionality, it is for who is an important question. All mission is forward. When Africans are coming to Europe and America, God is sending them. But for Europeans and the Americans, it may look like reverse. But for God, it is forward. And for the people who are coming, that's also forward mission. When Europeans went to Africa, that was a forward mission. Africans would have called it as a reverse mission, because Ethiopians were Christians even before Europeans became Christian or America was even discovered. So to understand mission, mission is God's mission. But for people, it may look like forward and reverse. But there's no concept of reverse. It was largely in the early 2000s in England, and in Germany, some people started calling mission as reverse. But there's no reverse mission. All is God's mission, and God's people are all moving forward and engaging places that God has placed them. So the concept of reverse is a kind of a wrong understanding of mission. It is the positionality, and who is considering it as reverse. For the Nigerians and Ethiopians who are coming to England and Germany and Sweden and America, it's forward for them. And but for the receiving countries, it may look like reverse. Once upon a time, we've sent missionaries. Now they are sending missionaries to save us. Because that's a reality. When Christianity was dominant in Europe, 1900, almost 80% of Christians were in Europe and North America. So they were the missionary force. Now there are 700 million Christians in Africa, 600 million something in Latin America, and some 500 million in Asia. So where Christianity grows, it pushes the people out. And so now they are Africans and Asians and Latin Americans are coming to America and Europe. This is just the story of Christianity, because all mission is forward from the perspective of God.
Thank you, Dr. George, for your perspective on the subject of reverse mission. We can now turn to the next question by Mark Covell. Mark asks, you suggested the need for missional discipleship training. Do you have suggestions for other immigrant community churches on this topic?
So yes, I would say my study is actually single case study, which is I exclusively actually studied about Ethiopian diaspora churches. So I didn't compare and contrast with other immigrant churches. So that's actually left for a kind of further study. But basically, my observation among or across other immigrant communities, I think most immigrants are lacking that. So I would say it's not only Ethiopian diaspora churches, but also other immigrant churches need that, missional discipleship kind of training. Because we have the same challenge in terms of like going beyond our own communities. So in that case, I would suggest that like other immigrant communities also need that. I want to comment this one thing, which is most people believe that, like, again, Dr. Sam is commenting about like the center of gravity of Christianity is actually moving to global south, and most of them are actually going out as missionaries. But when it comes to diaspora communities who already are sent, I think they miss the missional aspect of their movement, or if it is not missed, it is weak. So in that case, I would say potential is not enough, I would say. So most people are actually talking about, like, in their writings, in their speech, in their so many different platforms, I hear that people are saying that, like, there is a huge potential among immigrant communities, immigrant Christians, for missions, and that is true. But it's not really utilized for missions in a kind of practical way. So I think we have to transfer that potential to actual engagement. So for that, we still need that kind of intentional training, I would say. So from potential to actual engagement.
And if I can add to that as well, I think there needs to be awareness, for example, in church planting networks in the West or the host cultures, that these churches exist and they exist for missional purposes. And, you know, an intentional invitation into their circles. For the most part, when you go to these conferences, you don't really see a representation of immigrant pastors and leaders who have been sought out and invited to be nurtured and, you know, raised up. They have traveled a long way. They've come not in conventional ways. For the most part, being sent as an immigrant is not as easy. You know, it's through refugee camps, through, you know, fleeing their country. So when they come, they also have to sustain their culture and find a sense of peace and normalcy. So they're invested in kind of establishing a presence and creating a safe space for their communities, which kind of hinders their ability to cross-culturally go and engage and network with the host. And I think the host's job should be hosting, inviting, and, you know, identifying leaders and creating a space for them to take the next step, even if it is not the first gen pastor who's able to cross that bridge. There are, you know, 1.5 and second gen leaders who can safely be mentored by both collaboratively, not, you know, leaving their home church, but also, you know, not the host church grabbing on them, but collaboratively raising them so that they are the next leaders for an intergenerational, multi-ethnic church leadership. So I think there's that gap that we must look at and really hold accountable even the host church and host networks that don't necessarily create space for that.
Thank you for your response, Dr. Korcho, and for a thoughtful contribution from Mekdes. We still have some time to address one more question. The next question comes from Gilo Sila from Ethiopia. Gilo says, I believe that mission is the spirit of the church. If there is no mission spirit, what will be the future fate of these churches, those who are without mission work?
Yes, I do believe that that is the main resource we have when it comes to the work of the kingdom. Basically, this question actually redefines missions, which is how can we basically what is missions. In my book, when I was asking participants, as I said before, it's completely their understanding is completely shaped by the traditional model of missions, which is from the West to the West, in a sense that from the have ones to the not have ones, from the rich to the poor kind of approach is predominant, understanding, or this is their understanding of missions. But I think this question actually breaks that barrier, which is the resource is not really monetary. The resource is not really the so-called have ones to the poor ones, but I have no gold or silver, but I have Jesus to give you. That is actually what Peter said to that man. So the same thing. Missions actually, especially after Jesus resurrected, missions actually expanded and done by those poor people, uneducated people. So I would say, I think this is something that we can bring into the table as immigrants, as people from the global South. It's not because of what we have, monetarily speaking, but because of the resource that we receive from the Holy Spirit, from God Himself. But as he promised, I will give you my spirit so you can be my witness. So based on that, we can actually be on missions, and others can join us in this movement, instead of really leaning on the previous definitions of missions, basically. So this is my view, and this is one of the barriers we have. Like when it comes to like uh, me being missionary in America, sometimes I get that question. So they would say, I'm a missionary. Then like they would say like, where are you planning to go? So somewhere else, not in America. So even like when I was trying to look for a kind of organization that can host my calling, I was telling my story, but none of them are actually listening to my story. I mean, big mission organizations that you may know if I mention, but for the sake of, I'm not going to mention. But then they would say just like when I was at CIU, Columbia International University, as one of the students, I want to reach out to different organizations that has a booth during that conference week, mission conference week, and then most of them actually said, it's better for you to go to Somalia because of cultural proximity. It's better for you to go to Sudan or Eritrea, or these neighboring countries in East Africa, and they want to relocate me back to Africa, even to my home country. And basically, most Western communities, when they think about missions, they want to send us back to our own countries. That is the trend, even among the big organizations and mission. Among churches, American churches as well. The first thought that they have about us is that like, we can collaborate with you for what? To go back to Ethiopia. Nothing is wrong, but relocating us back to our own country or wherever we have a kind of cultural proximity is still that mindset that you are not a missionary here, but missionaries are still needed in those areas that are still in need of material or humanitarian needs and all that. So basically this is still like the the trend. So this question actually brings us together by receiving the Holy Spirit. That is the main resource that we need, and we can be on the same platform for missions, be it in the States and beyond. So that would be my response.
This is the traditional understanding of mission. It is over there, out there. But mission sending and mission receiving, mission field and mission force, it's all been mixed up in the understanding. It's got 200 years of history of modern missionary movement. So now everywhere is both a mission field and a mission force. There's a church everywhere. There's a church in every country of the world. There's no place that you can go where there is not a church. So we're living in some extraordinary times in the history of the Christianity and the story of Christianity. To understand that everywhere is a mission field and everyone in the God's church is on mission everywhere. So from everywhere to everywhere, need to say go and come, send and receive. And so this mutuality and reciprocity need to be established in our understanding of missions. Come is also a mission word, not just go. Come and help us. Paul's Macedonian call. Come is nothing but go from another place. Paul was in Asia, a Macedonian man appearing in Acts chapter 16, saying, come and help. Paul is going, but for a Macedonian man, Paul was coming. So go and come, send and receive, depart and arrive, mission sending force, mission force, and mission field. It's all been merged in our understanding. So this is a new way of understanding missions for the 21st century reality. It'll take some time in the church circles and the mission thinkers and mission resources to understand this global reality of everywhere to everywhere missions. So, just take time. It took 200 years in America and, but the understanding is rereading scripture, re-theologizing it, missiology matters. And I think we have a lot of work ahead as Africans and Asians who are coming here in America, because we have this kind of, bi perspective. I don't know, if you get to my age, you'll become bifocal. You need to have a near lens and the far lens. So we need to have a here and there vision and a polycentric, omnidirectional, hyper-connected world. Polycenter means multiple centers. Omnidirection means every direction. And so how do we understand mission in the polycentric, omnidirectional, hyperconnected world? And so there is much rethinking. I think Ethiopian church, Indian church, American church has much to do with it, because America is truly a globalized place, because there's a Christian from more number of countries here in America than any other country in the world. So America has a very unique role to re-engage the world with this new way of thinking. And so we have much work to do. And Langham has been in the forefront of producing a lot of this migration, diaspora literature, and especially resources in Africa. And so we commend, I really hold Langham in high regard in this, in producing tons of resources for Africa and Asia. And we are grateful for that partnership. Thank you, Mehari. Congratulations again. Thank you, Sophia, for hosting this.
Thank you
Good
so
to
much.
see you, as always, Mekdes, and Luke at the other window, which is muted. Blessings, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. George, for reminding us that the mission field truly is everywhere, and we need to reflect on how we can be agents of change and participate in God's mission right where we are. This final part of our presentation is dedicated to how to get a copy of Ethiopian Diaspora Churches on Mission. So the book is available at langhamliterature.org with free worldwide shipping and available on several online retailers such as Amazon, Christian Book, Eden, or as an ebook from your preferred e-reader service. It is also available on library platforms and such subscription services as Perlego. We also encourage you to check with your local Christian bookseller for availability. You now see a slide with that information, and we will leave it up for a couple of minutes. And the chat will stay open as well, so please feel free to greet one another. And for those who stayed with us till the end, thank you so much. On behalf of Langham Publishing and Dr. Mehari Korcho, we deeply appreciate your time, interest, and support. A special thank you again to our guest speakers for contributing to today's conversation. We wish you all a peaceful rest of the day. The slide will remain open on screen for 2 more minutes along with the chat. Thanks again, everyone.